To all of you up here, just really incredible. Well done to all of you.
Thank you.
Sam, let's start out. This film inspired very much by stories that your grandfather told you. Was there any specific story that you heard from him that served as a catalyst for you wanting to make the film?
Well, he just told me one very small story about him carrying a message. He was a very small man. He was 5'4", and in the winter, the mist in no man's land, he told me, used to hang at 6 feet, so they would send out their smallest runners to carry messages because they couldn't be seen over the top of the mist. And I had, from that one thought, really, the idea of just one man carrying a message, and that grew into this movie, but it went through obviously various versions in my head, because the First World War was a movie of was a war of paralysis in many ways. It was a very static war, and people lost, hundreds of thousands of lives lost over 200 or 300 yards of land. So how was it going to be possible to tell a story about a man carrying a message that was going to travel more than just 200 yards? Or parallel along the lines. And then I discovered this period in 1917 where the Germans, I'm not a historian, but in my research I found this time the Germans retreated to the Hindenburg line, and suddenly the British were cut adrift in this land that had been basically destroyed, razed to the ground by the Germans, left behind a few treats for them, booby traps, landmines, snipers. They destroyed anything of any lasting value, cut down the trees, made it impassable, as you see in the movie, and that was the story. That's when we sort of found the story. And I took a basic story structure to Krysty. But being a director by nature, not a writer, when I actually had to write, page 1, scene 1, I just found what was outside the window very interesting. Suddenly, I just basically froze. I had a lot of cards with a lot of ideas, some knowing laughter going on. And I needed someone to sort of catalyse the whole thing. And Krysty was it. Krysty by nature is a writer, and so without her, it would have still been on my laptop, entitled Unfinished World War I Project. So she's the reason we're here in many ways.
Krysty, you're working with Sam on the script, and he says, by the way, it's all going to be in one shot. How does that change the way you collaborate with him, if at all? And then how does that change your approach to the script?
I mean, it completely changes your approach to the script, because you need a story that exists in real time, has a beginning, a middle, and end, feels satisfying. So, I mean, instantly you have to go about it in a very different way. And also, I mean, in the very first call with Sam, he ended it with, by the way, it's going to be one shot. And I was like, I might have swore, which I won't do here. And so from that moment, what was running through my head was like, how do you sustain? How does it have breath and air? How does it, how do you make a pace that lasts throughout 2 hours? So you kind of have to spend a lot of time working on that, which was fun, so much fun. It was actually enjoyable. And then like collaborating with Sam, he's such a visionary, he knows exactly what he wants, and that's delightful as a writer for the other directors out there. It's so much fun when a director knows what they want, because you can execute that and you can collaborate completely, which worked as well. It's fun.
George and Dean, how does the one-shot approach sort of affect the way you prepare and then perform your roles? Is it just a lot more rehearsal? Are you counting steps as you're also reciting dialogue?
Yeah, I mean, where do I start? I mean, with normal film, you don't necessarily get the opportunity to rehearse that much. Whereas this film, we started 6 months before we actually started shooting. So every day, me and George was in our costumes, our webbing, just rehearsing every scene and military training and weapons training. So there was a lot of build-up to the actual start of shooting. But the whole one-shot thing, I mean, I found it very beneficial as an actor, because it allows you to just become fully immersed in what you're doing without having to worry about anything else. So it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's as Dean says, the longer, the longer scenes allow you to kind of immerse yourself, but by the same token, given all the rehearsal that we had to do, and it's the most mutual experience I've ever had on a job, because everything's got to be in harmony. There is no one lead element to the show. it's this constant handoff, and you affect how the camera moves, and the camera affects how you move, and you've kind of got to be aware of that unconsciously. And so there's so many things going on at once, that kind of three-dimensional understanding of the work that you're doing and the scene that you're doing is something that I learned from this process particularly.
Pippa, one thing that I thought about watching the film was just the sets were incredible. It felt like you constructed 25 miles of trenches for this film. Can you just talk about the sets and maybe the trenches and just how much did you build, or how much was there?
Well, we built about a mile of trenches in all, and obviously they weren't all in the same place. So there was a section which was at an airfield, Bovingdon Airfield near London, and then another massive section down on Salisbury Plain, which is a big army base. But as you can imagine, as George was saying, not only do the actors and the dialogue and the scenes all have to fit together, and the camera, but all the sets have got to fit together. So the set has to be the right length for each scene, whereas normally you would obviously just cut away, you go to something else, but you can't do that. So they would be walking out and rehearsing, and then Sam would say, "It's not long enough, you've got to dig some more." So off the production designer would go and create another length of trench, so it was tricky.
Roger, I would personally love to go sequence by sequence to figure out how exactly you did this, but we don't have that kind of time. But when we were talking backstage, let's start with, you said that they had to invent a camera. They had to create a brand new camera for shooting.
They didn't invent it, but I've always worked with Ariflex all my career, really. And they brought out this LF camera, but it was a studio camera, quite a heavy camera. And my wife and I were over in Munich, and we asked them if they were ever going to make a mini version. This was like in August, so obviously way before we started shooting. And they very kindly guaranteed that they would produce this camera for us in time of the shoot. And I think we got we had 3 bodies which we needed, because we were swapping rigs all the time, and we needed one backup. I think they came up with the last camera about 2 or 3 weeks before we started shooting.
Wow.
And this was because we needed to get it into tiny spaces all the time and down the trench. And it was quite comical at times, because we had this, what was effectively, it's an incredible camera, but it's a very small body. So you had this tiny camera on a massive crane at times. So this huge, it's like a 175-foot techno crane with an iPhone on the end of it. It was
a little exaggerated.
No, it's better than an iPhone, which I know.
No, I mean not the camera, I mean the crane. The one shot we did, which is the long run at the end. Okay, it starts on a 50-foot techno crane with a camera on this stabilized head, and it's like the grips have hung it on a piece of pipe on the crane pushes down, then George gets up the top of the trench, the grips take the camera off the crane, and a whole load of guys are hanging on the crane because the weight difference anyway, then they're starting to walk back, go faster and faster with George as he's starting to run. They hook it onto another crane, which is like a 20-foot to 22-foot crane that's on a tracking vehicle. Those guys hook it off, and then those guys run across the shop because they're in costume. You can probably see them somewhere. And the tracking vehicle tears off down the lane for like 300 yards or something. Well, George would know better than me. And then at the end, George runs in the trench, and the camera's on this arm on the tracking vehicle, and the arm pushes out, so we get down into the trench with it.
And that's just one shot.
It's a lot of fun.
Complicated is it when it's, so much of the film is outdoors?
It's really complicated. It requires a lot of, I'm not religious, but a lot of praying. One of the early production meetings, I can remember, was we were talking about the schedule and everything, and I brought up the thing that we had to shoot everything under cloud, not only because of the look, because it was right for the film, but just in terms of the continuity of shot to shot. And I can see a few faces in my head now at that production meeting. Oh my God. I mean, yeah, you've got to be you'll have a lot of luck. The first day we had a fully sunny day and no cloud, and everybody's going, if this is like last year, we were really screwed. But then
We were behind at the end of the first day, and at the end of the second day we were ahead, because we'd spent the whole first day rehearsing not only the work of the first day, but the work of the second and the third. And then the weather was great, and we were ready to go, and we just sort of tore through it all. So it was completely unpredictable in that sense. Would you say, Pippa, the whole thing was...
It was. I mean, I did get a slightly tense phone call from the studio on day one at about 4 o'clock saying, you know, you are meant to tell us when you turn over, just send us an email. And I went, yeah, we haven't turned over yet. And there was a sort of pause. And I said, but we've been rehearsing, it'll be fine. And to their credit, they said, okay, that's fine. Because we'd always warned them that might happen. I think they weren't expecting on the first day though, but yeah.
George and Dean, was there any specific stories that kind of helped you guys find your characters that you heard? Personal accounts?
I actually didn't know this before I started filming this film, but I had a great-great-grandfather who served as a soldier in the First World War. He was a part of the cavalry, and he got shot and was paralysed. And he laid out in no man's land for 4 days trying to survive. And he ended up making his way back and working in a poppy factory until the day he died. The first poppy factory actually that ever opened. So he's in a book. It's like diary entries of soldiers, and I'd look at that a lot to get inspiration. Yeah.
I mean, there's kind of cherry picking loads, because again, there's so much material to read and to listen to, like audio books as well. I've forgotten voices. I don't know, like there was one thing to go back to what you said about the way that the camera worked. A way into it for me, I saw when we first met Dennis Gassner, who designed it. There was a Stanley Spencer, who's an English artist, book on his coffee table, and so I kind of got quite into the war artists and Paul Nash, and Krysty got me a lovely picture on wrap of a Paul Nash picture. And there's at the beginning of the process, I learned so much about, you know, what I was saying about the three-dimensional aspect of it. When Sam was explaining the way of how powerful it is, what you see and what you don't see, that actually informed kind of how I thought Schofield would cope with the war, in the way that you sort of, if I look at what's in front of me, I won't see this dead person here. And that's what that focus becomes, that sort of tunnel vision, in this sense, in a positive sense. And I thought, you know, Schofield is almost an extension of the camera, like he is your eyes. And so that was a kind of reference to the war artists, and the way that there was sort of this real kind of like amazing new sort of birth of seeing the world, because these war artists were depicting things which you'd never seen before as well. And so the kind of war artists were a way into it for me, because it was sort of an extension of what Sam was saying of how it was going to be shot, and then also who I played, you know, and how he, as a character, I think would have coped with getting through it.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. I could sit here all day with you guys and talk about this. Ladies and gentlemen, George MacKay. Roger Deakins, Sam Mendes,